What type of environment, what type of world, what type of country would you like your children and grandchildren to grow up in? And I think that's a pretty good context to have this conversation. We've assembled an impressive group of panelists, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. And that moment is quick upon me. From the education world, Becky Ballbeck, Dr. Becky Ballbeck, Director of Student Support Services at Everett Schools. My wife and I have known Becky for about 25 of your 28 years in this line of work. Noel DeBelli, Edmonds Community College student trustee. I was chatting with Noel earlier, and I said I was in front of trustees when I was a student, but not as a trustee. John Bauer, the Daily Herald, which, by the way, this is a role he normally plays as the moderator. And John, thank you for joining us this evening. The aforementioned Teresa Whipple, My Edmonds News, the Mount Lake Terrace News, and Linwood Today. A longtime friend, Dave Erling, the mayor of Edmonds, and Senator Mark Elias, another gentleman I've known for quite some time. It's good to see you, sir. Janice Green, president of the NAACP of Snohomish County. Janice, thank you for being here. And Jacqueline Sterna, Volunteers of America Regional Director, Skagit Dispute Resolution Center. So a round of applause for our panelists, please. So here comes the questions. We have 2 minutes, and Becky, we're going to start with you.
Ready.
You're ready? Based on your knowledge, personal experience, and observation, are you alarmed by the tone and tenor of discourse as well as its reach into everyday life? Why or why not?
Well, first, allow me to thank you for this opportunity to participate in this evening. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. I can't help but be alarmed and concerned about the tone and tenor of civil discourse in our country and state and locally. As I think about the recent presidential election and events that have been following, it seems that societal issues, including gender, immigration, race, have reached a new level of discourse, and unfortunately, I think they've taken a turn where the conversation has digressed into hate and violence, and a tone that isn't conducive for dialogue, for coming together. I've been in education for almost 30 years, and much of that time has been focused on helping and teaching students the skills to be able to problem solve, to be empathetic, to listen to one another. And when they have models that don't display those characteristics, it makes it all the more difficult for us to emulate and give them good role models for those traits.
Trustee DeBelli?
I would like to, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity, and I'll touch on a topic Dr. Becky just talked about, which is immigration. I'm an international student here at Edmonds Community College, and after the recent presidential election, there has been a lot of tension when it comes to international students, and I'm more focused, I'm talking about the students that came from countries that were like Sudan or some, you know what I'm talking about, the students that were from the countries where the president told not to come. Anyways, I was alarmed because we had a lot of, we have some students at Edmonds Community College from these countries, and I was really passionate and really wanted to get engaged and help those students to feel comfortable and safe in our community. And I didn't want those students to feel as if they were, they came here looking for opportunity, and I didn't want them to feel as if they're missing out. They don't have a safe place to have a conversation and talk about engage in the community, talk about what to add or to take away from current issues we have in our communities. And being an international student, I wanted my voice to be heard, and I wanted to make sure I had a safe community where I can speak to other people and talk and listen at the same time. Yeah, thank you.
Two things I should mention quickly, John. I apologize for interrupting. Noel was last year, I believe, the student body president.
Yeah.
So you and I are both recovering elected officials. And then secondly, we should give attribution, of a positive note, to the Emory University Law School panel for developing this question. Mr. Bauer from the media profession, sir.
Thank you. And Bob, it's always good to be on the same stage with you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm much more careful, much more better spoken behind a keyboard than I am a microphone. But this is something that concerns me, and I do put a lot of thought toward, because it's part of my job. I'm the opinion page editor for the Herald. I'm responsible not only for writing most of the editorials, but kind of curating the letters to the editor, choosing our opinion columnists, choosing the editorial cartoon. So that means I'm trying to promote that discourse in our community. The editorials I write are, urging action on a specific piece of legislation or something in the community, or even just informing people about what's going on in their community. And if that message isn't getting through because people have shut down, aren't participating in a civil discourse, then what I'm trying to do is frustrated. If it just prevents us reaching any solution to anything going on in our lives, whether that's government or social agencies or just the things that are happening in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Teresa.
Thanks again for having me. And I operate 3 online-only news websites in South Snohomish County, and I will say that having an online-only type forum, it's part of the problem. People, I will admit that, people tend to hide behind their keyboards. They write things without realizing someone's on the receiving end is a real person. They say things they wouldn't say to somebody if they were looking them in the eye. And I think that's part of the issue that we're facing as a society now. Everybody's on social media. Everybody is kind of sniping at each other on Facebook, on Twitter, all the way up to the executive branch of government. And it's unfortunate, and it causes a level of breakdown in our communication that I think is a problem. I wish I had a crystal ball to say what the future holds or a magic solution, and I don't, but I can tell you that I think whatever we can do to encourage people to have face-to-face communication, and when they are online, to make sure that they're accountable for their comments. That's why I do require people on my 3 websites to use their real names. I try to enforce that as much as possible by making sure they have a real identity. I'd say I'm successful about 90% of the time. Sometimes a few anonymous names slip through, but it makes a difference, because I feel if you're going to attack somebody, you better be willing to use your name, and if you're going to respond, you better be willing to use your name too. And I think that goes a long way toward some civil discourse. Thank you.
Now, thank you for that response. I think most of us would agree that anonymity is not a bedrock of democracy. From the political world, Mayor Dave Earling.
Well, good evening. I have no political opinion, and I will give none tonight. Yes, of course. The problem is in front of us all the time, every day. Trying to have some sort of civil discourse as far as I'm concerned. And tonight you'll hear basically 4 themes from me. One has to do with the keyboard, another has to do with the media, another has to do with polarization, and the 4th one is what's actual facts, which we sometimes have a hard time grasping. Too often, as Teresa's already mentioned, social media is a way to sit at the keyboard and say what you want to say. And I have to give credit to Teresa because she keeps pretty close track of what's going on with comments. A number of times I know that she's taken commenters offline, not only for what they had to say, but just took them off, period. One of the other things that's concerning, besides the social media, could be Facebook, could be a favorite blog. It begins to create that polarization that I mentioned. Or whether you look at favorite TV stations, if you look at Fox, well, that's more conservative. You look at MSNBC, it's a little more liberal. CNBC's kind of wandering around trying to figure out what they're doing. But the underlying concern for me is that we have fractured what we consider our political norms. That is being dignified, being objective, finding more times that we can actually discuss something, either figuratively or actual physically, with a face-to-face conversation. We need to fix it. I'm not sure what the answer is, and I'm sure Mark Elias is about to solve it.
Well, thank you, Mayor. We were discussing before the panel that I think, theoretically the Democrat and Republican on the panel. The challenge is we really like one another. So we're going to try and give you a show and try and come up with some things to disagree on. But,
Damn it.
It is a great panel to be a part of. It's also fun to see John Bauer have to answer some questions for us. Excited about that. You know, I appreciate Emory University's work in framing this question. It's not my favorite question, though, because I think the idea of being alarmed, I'm an action-oriented person, and being alarmed and sitting around and being alarmed doesn't feel good to me. I think it's important to remember that just like any illness, when you start to see the symptoms, you've actually been sick for some time. When you get the cold or the flu, when you start coughing, you're actually 2 or 3 days into the disease. And I think that's the same right now for the body politic. This breakdown in civil discourse is because we've had, in many ways, a broken political system, and we've had a society that hasn't been engaging with one another for some time, and now we're beginning to see those symptoms break loose. I'm reminded, though, that this isn't the first time in American history that this has happened. As Americans, we like to think that everything we do is the first time it's ever happened in human history. Even in our own history, there was a civil war that was fought. In the 60s, we lost great leaders to assassinations. There's been great turmoil in this country. And I think at the core of it, we need to be reminded that self-government is difficult. The idea that we, 300 million Americans, will govern ourselves is not easy, and the challenges we face are great, and so that's not going to be an easy, seamless, happy process. But I think at the end of the day, what I'm pleased at is that some of the big issues that have been boiling under the surface are finally coming out. We're finally talking about racism and sexism in authentic ways and hearing the voices of people that we haven't heard in our dialogue. And I think that the journey to recovery is to begin addressing the symptoms, begin looking at them, and begin tackling them. And I'm excited to have this dialogue.
Thank you, Senator. Janice?
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. So I am very alarmed about the level of vitriol in our public and private discourse. It's like we've taken to our corners and we come out fighting, and nobody's listening to anyone. So people seem to be isolated. They talk to people who think like they do, who work through, and so you don't see those conversations moving us forward. In fact, I've even seen families and friends and other people stop talking to each other because of politics. And we've got there and we need to move on just because we have different viewpoints. I also see it play out in our communities because we become issue-focused instead of people-focused. And we become issue-focused, like say, for instance, Black Lives Matter. You know, when we say Black Lives Matter or over-aggressive policing, we don't focus on the issue. We focus on, you know, Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. We don't get to the point where we're looking at what's the root cause and what's the issue, what is it we need to deal with. So I would say that what really scares me is the acceptance of the hate speech, the racial dog whistles, the xenophobia, how we dehumanize groups of people and making them the other. And when we do that, that gives some license for people to actually take action and negative action. I mean, I've lived here since the 60s, and I can't take a walk. I take a walk every day, and when I take a walk, there's quite often somebody's going to yell a racial epithet at me while I'm walking down the street, right? So those are the type of things that I think we need to deal with. And we need to understand that as complaints increase, we need to address them head on, that we need to tell the truth, and that we need to face it, and that we need to stop sweeping these things under the corner, turning our heads, making like we didn't see it or it didn't affect us, because if it affects any of us, it affects all of us. And this is a community that we live in.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
Thanks for having me here tonight. As a mediator, I am also very concerned about the tone and tenor of discourse in public life. What I'm witnessing and experiencing as a mediator and a facilitator is that people have left a place of common courtesy, of respect, of the ability to sit with themselves, to sit in discomfort, and really actively hear, listen, and be with someone else who has a different position, whatever it may be. I'm finding that there's a higher level of hostility. People are more activated. And with that, there's a lot of fast speech that might come from anger or anxiety, and that it's really difficult to communicate when people are in a heated place. So the contempt, the defensiveness, dwelling on the negative, they're all barriers to communication. They're all barriers to being able to hold a civil discourse or dialogue. No matter what one's position is.
Well, thank you very much. You've left me a little bit of time to respond, which is generally a dangerous territory. But I would say that a theme that I picked up here is this growing absence of just being kind. I think that, and this is a strange mix of words, but we need to be aggressively kind. We need to have some sense of the outcome of that kindness, but it's just this everyday civility. This ability to act with someone else the way that you would pray you would be acted upon yourself. So thank you for your well-thought answers, and thank you for your timeliness.